Hi, this is Mrs. Duncan, and for your Humanities 101 online class, and this is the second part of the literary terms. The ones we already did were focused primarily on poetry. These can be in poetry or in any kind of literature. It could be in a play like Julius Caesar, and so we'll be looking more at theater in the next unit. But here is an example of irony, and irony can be a little difficult to detect, and there's several kinds. There's verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. And one of the words in your textbook says a contradiction of some sort. The definition here, irony is a mode or type of expression that conveys a reality that's different from and usually opposite to appearance or expectation. So there's the contradiction. We can say one thing and mean another. And so we have that here in Mark Antony's speech, his speech in Julius Caesar. It's not a soliloquy. He is actually addressing audience after Julius Caesar has been murdered. And he says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him." Well, if you read the rest of his speech, you find out that in actuality he does praise Caesar. And so it's irony because he is saying the opposite of what he means. And we use that in our own lives. We say, oh, well, I'm really happy about that. And of course, just the tone of voice can indicate that we're indeed not really happy. So that kind of use in our everyday language is used in literature as well. Another kind of irony is situational irony, and this one takes a little bit more explanation. This is from a short story called Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Mrs. Mallard is told that her husband has been killed in an accident, and while she feels sorrow when she's first told, during the next hour, the story of an hour, she comes to understand that she also feels great relief. She rejoices inwardly that she would be free, 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 and she envisions a future where, quote, there would be no one to live for her. Instead, she would live for herself. And just as she comes to this realization, her husband, who she thought was dead, had been in the reported accident, appears at the door. And when she sees him, she has a heart attack and dies. And the doctor who attends her pronounces that she has died from the joy that kills. Okay, so how is this situational irony? Well, first of all, Mrs. Mallard, who acknowledges that her husband was kind and good, reacts to his death by rejoicing inwardly. That's an unexpected response. It makes us wonder, did they have a really good marriage? At the end of the story, he reappears, and the other characters assume that Mrs. Mallard's heart attack is triggered by the unexpected joy. You know, she thought he was dead, but he's alive. But, you know, at the same time, we know. Ironically, at the time we expect her to grieve, she's joyous. And so it's situational. The other characters in the book and the story think, oh, she was so happy, and we know that it's really not her joy that caused her to have the heart attack. So it's the situation and the unexpected things that happen. Dramatic irony. Let's take a look at an example here from a poem. So see, you've got three different examples: irony in a play, irony in a short story, irony in a poem. And this is a description from The Highwayman. The tension grows as the title character gallops up to the inn where his lover Bess, the landlord's daughter, has been captured, unbeknown to him, by the king's soldiers. Readers know, okay, this is the thing about dramatic irony. You know something as the reader that the other people in the story don't. The readers know that disaster awaits because the soldiers have tied a rifle pointed at her breast, and after a silent struggle, she's managed to get her finger on the trigger. Well, because she is gagged, you know, she's got the thing around her mouth and tightly bound, the only way she can warn her lover of the trap of the ambush is to pull the trigger, as signal with the shot that kills her. When the shot rings out, the reader understands the depth of the tragedy, but the highwayman riding to safety does not. Okay, that's sad, but it's a dramatic irony, and the irony is that the characters pretty much don't know. I mean, Bess obviously knows, but you, the reader, know the outcome. The tension is built as the highwayman rides closer to the inn, and you're just wondering, you know, is what's going to happen? You know, disaster that could take place, and he doesn't. So that's a type of irony. He's going in thinking everything's okay, she's not, and there's a contradiction in that. So that's another type. All right, simile and metaphor, and I particularly focus on metaphor. And simile is a kind of metaphor, and metaphor is making comparisons between things. It is a simile when it uses the words like or as to make that comparison. So very simply, very easy to recognize, oh, my love, my sweetheart is like a red, red rose. We know that he is comparing his sweetheart, his lover, to a red, red rose that is newly sprung in June. She's also like a melody that's sweetly played in tune. So it's pleasing, it's beautiful, those are things that are positive, and he has compared her to them using like or as, and that is imagery, but it's specifically a simile. A metaphor does the same thing but doesn't use the like or as, and there's several kinds. You have the direct, no man is an island. Well, we know that's not, that's figurative. No man is an island, but they're saying that like an island. No man is like an island, and that it's entire by itself. Every man is a piece of the continent. Now, you aren't literally, truly a piece of the continent. It's just a figure of speech. It's to make a point. It's say we're like we're attached to the continent, like the same way we're attached to humanity. That's a direct metaphor. Didn't use like or as, but making that comparison. Sometimes it's not as direct. Oh, Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wrack. The prize we sought is won. And these are taken from a poem he wrote about President Lincoln being assassinated. Well, what does that have to do with a captain and a ship? Well, he's using these, sometimes we call them analogies. The fallen president. Lincoln is the captain of a ship that has weathered many storms, meaning, like the Civil War. Stood up to rough weather and other challenges, trying to get the Emancipation Proclamation passed. So it's just an extended implied metaphor using terms for ship to talk about President Lincoln and his assassination. There are a couple other kinds. I do want to look at personification. So when you use a specific type of metaphor or figurative language where you give human qualities to something that isn't human. In this case, it's time. How soon hath time, the subtle thief of youth, stolen on his wing my 23rd year, John Milton wrote. And of course, time is not really a person, a thief who could steal. That would be a person, but it's describing, saying they're like a thief. So that's why it's a type of metaphor. Last is symbolism, and symbols represent, they stand for or suggest something else. They're literal in that they have a specific meaning in the story or the poem, but they have a greater meaning. They represent some other bigger idea. So here's a conventional. There's different categories. Conventional symbols are those that are cultural. We understand that. And then there's some that are really special just to the story. They're called literary. Let's look at a conventional. This is from the novel The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. The youth ran like a madman, remember that's a simile, to reach the woods before a bullet could discover him. He ducked his head low like a football player. Oh, they've got similes in here too. In his haste his eyes almost closed, and the scene was a wild blur. Pulsating saliva stood at the corners of his mouth. Ooh, what imagery. Within him, as he hurled himself forward, was born a love, a despairing fondness for this flag. The flag, which was near him. It was a creation of beauty and invulnerability. It was a goddess, radiant, that bent its form with an imperious gesture to him. It, meaning the flag, was a woman, red and white, hating and loving, that called him with the voice of his hopes. Because no harm could come to it, he endowed it with power. He kept near as if it could be a saver of lives. And an imploring cry went from his mind. So he's running through the woods trying to dodge bullets in a war. He's ducking down. He's just, you can imagine. But then he sees the flag, the American flag, and he hurls towards it. and all of what it represents comes to him. So we understand that. We understand when we look at our flag, it symbolizes, it represents our country and all these kinds of ideas of patriotism and freedom. It isn't literally patriotism, it isn't literally freedom. It's a piece of cloth with, you know, red stripes, white stripes, a blue field of stars, but it's what it represents. It's a symbol for our country. It's a symbol of all the things that we value that are unique to our country, like patriotism and freedom. So that's what makes it a symbol. Those are pretty easy to recognize, but they all, authors also use literary. That means they make up a special symbolism that may not exist out in the everyday world. Same book. Here's a use. At times he, talking about our soldier there, regarded the wounded soldiers in an envious way. He conceived persons with torn bodies to be peculiarly happy. He wished that he too had a wound, a red badge of courage. Okay, so we know that the red badge of courage is from a wound, and it's also part of the title, which is always a tip-off if you've got that repeat that maybe this is a symbol. So let's look at it. This young, rather innocent soldier is described in this passage as inexperienced with war. We know that if you read the story, he's naive, he's young, he's frightened, and there's a time in which he runs away from the battle. He rejoins the group and realizes that everybody else has markers. You know, they have wounds, they have bullet wounds. You know, you can tell they've been in the battle, and because he ran away from the battle, he doesn't have that. And it kind of exposes his cowardice. His fear and his longing to be part of a more knowledgeable cohort or group leads him to view the wounds of his fellow soldiers as symbols of strength and courage. Throughout the book, the symbolic value of wounds, physical and emotional, becomes deeper and more nuanced. Wounds may suggest bravery, but they also come to represent the terrible damage that war brings to all those affected by it. Here, he looks at the wound as a badge. A bloody red badge of courage. You know, it's really the wound is bound, you know, with cloth. And he's like, I wish I had one of those to show, you know, some bravery. But we know that those the soldiers that are wounded are not peculiarly happy. And overall, that's not really what Stephen Crane is trying to get across. But we understand, and this is something he made up, a red badge of courage. It's you might say, well, yeah, their wounds do indicate that, but that's his symbol that he created. So those are some other important terms that writers use, whether it would be poetry or a short story, a novel, or a drama. They all utilize irony, similes and metaphors, symbols to some extent. Not every poem has irony, not every story has irony, not every story has symbolism, but all those genres use them. So hopefully that helps you understand, see some more examples of the terms that you're introduced to in our literature chapter.